At the prestigious Xenological Research Institute, an ambitious group of alien researchers develops a groundbreaking pain simulation chamber to study different species' pain threshold. When a human volunteer joins their program, their clinical experiment transforms into a haunting revelation about humanity's capacity to endure, leaving them fundamentally changed by what they witness. In the grand atrium of the Helios Institute for Xenological Studies, Dr. Xylex Voss's crystalline form cast prismatic patterns across the amphitheater walls. The assembled researchers, representing 27 different species from across the galaxy, watched as the holographic display materialized above the central podium. "Esteemed colleagues," Xylex began, their translucent body pulsing with subtle blue luminescence, "I present the Nexus Chamber, the first comprehensive pain simulation system capable of replicating precise discomfort levels across all known sentient physiologies." The hologram expanded, revealing a sleek, pod-like structure wrapped in neural interface matrices, NXIERA, their gaseous forms swirling in tight analytical patterns, raised an appendage. "And you propose to use this to study?" The word carried a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "Precisely." Xylex's crystalline edges sharpened with excitement. "It's studying pain." "We've studied pain responses across silicon-based life forms, energy beings, and collective consciousnesses, but humans remain an anomaly. Their documented ability to function under extreme duress defies our current understanding of pain threshold." Thalum Krex shifted their amorphous form nervously. "The Ethics Committee has concerns. Humans are classified as a developing species. Their pain response mechanisms are primitive, which is exactly why we must study them," Xylex countered, projecting data streams showing human survival stories. A human recently survived 3 days trapped under rubble. Another swam across an ice-covered lake to save a stranger. Their capacity for endurance is unprecedented. The assembled scientists murmured, their various forms rippling, glowing, and fluctuating with mixed reactions. Vex Meridian, their silicon-based structure reflecting light in sharp angles, stepped forward. "And you have a human volunteer?" Xylex's form brightened. "Better. We have Astrid Novak, former combat medic, survival specialist, and according to preliminary scans, possessing neural pathways that suggest extensive experience with pain management." The hologram shifted to display Astrid's profile, a tall human with intricate scarification patterns along one side of their face, testament to past trial. What caught the alien's attention wasn't the scars, but the calm, almost amused expression in her biographical hall. "She arrives tomorrow," Xylex announced, their form now pulsing with anticipatory patterns. "The Nexus Chamber is calibrated. Safety protocols are in place, and we stand on the brink of revolutionary insights into human physiology." Carl Nexus, their bioluminescent tentacles dimming with concern, made a final observation. "Voss, that if anything goes wrong, this could severely impact human-alien relations." Xylex's crystalline form momentarily clouded. "Which is precisely why we will proceed with utmost caution. This isn't just about pain science. It's about understanding a species that continues to confound our expectations." As the meeting adjourned, none of the assembled scientists could shake the feeling that they were about to embark on something far more profound than a simple research. In the shadow of the Nexus Chamber, they were about to confront truths about humanity that would shake their understanding of resilience. The arrival bay hummed with nervous energy as Astrid Novak stepped off the quantum transport. She moved with the Predator's grace, each step measured and deliberate. The scarification patterns on her face caught the artificial light, creating shadows that seemed to dance across her feet. Dr. Xylex Voss's crystalline form flickered with barely contained excitement. "Welcome to Helios, Specialist Novak. Your reputation precedes." Astrid's laugh was warm, but carried an edge. "Just Astrid, and I assume you mean the Orpheus incident?" She adjusted the simple duffel bag on her shoulder, her only luggage for what could be months of. Thalum Krex undulated forward, their amorphous form reflecting anxiety. 16 days trapped in a collapsed mining tunnel on Titan. Entertained yourself by solving complex mathematical equations scratched into the ice wall. Had to keep the mind busy, Astrid shrugged. The casual dismissal of what most species would consider traumatic sent ripples of unease through the assembled research team. NXIRA's gaseous form contracted Perhaps we should discuss the protocols, Vex Meridian interjected. Their silicon-based form rigid with formality. The Nexus Chamber required. I read the briefing package, Astrid interrupted, already striding toward the research wing. Quantum neural interfacing, pain simulation matrices, emergency shutdown protocol. Fascinating tech. Though I have to ask, why design something specifically to cause? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Xylex moved to keep pace with her. Crystal facets refracting uncertainty. Pain is universal, yet each species processes it differently. Your kind's relationship with pain is. Astrid stopped at the observation window overlooking the Nexus. The pod-like structure gleamed beneath the laboratory lights, its neural interface, matrices pulsing with potential. Unique is one word for, she mused. Found my preliminary psych evaluation interesting, did Carl Nexus, who had been monitoring from a distance, floated their bioluminescent form dimmed with concern. Your responses were unexpected. When asked about your pain threshold, you haven't found it yet. Astrid completed the quote, turning to face the assembled team. Her scarified face broke into a grin that made several researchers involuntarily Look, I know what you're all thinking. Humans are primitive, reckless, possibly masochistic, but pain isn't our enemy, it's information. Sometimes, it's motivation. Occasionally, her eyes gleamed. It's even in Xylex's form brightened with fascination. You speak of pain almost. Philosophic. Had plenty of time to think about it. Astrid's hand unconsciously traced the scars on her face. So, when do we? The research team exchanged glances, their various forms betraying a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. This human wasn't just accepting of their experiments, she seemed eager. We begin with baseline readings tomorrow, Xylex announced, trying to maintain professional detachment. For now, Carl will show you to your core. As Astrid followed the bioluminescent researcher, NXIRA drifted close to Xylex. She's not what we No, Xylex agreed, their crystalline form clouding slightly. She's far more interesting and far more concerned. Watching Astrid disappear down the corridor, the research team couldn't shake the feeling that their carefully designed experiment was about to take an unexpected turn. They hadn't prepared for someone who viewed pain as an old. The first series of tests began at dawn. Inside the Nexus Chamber, Astrid lay back against the contoured surface, her expression neutral as Vex Meridian attached the neural interface. The silicon-based scientists' movements were precise, almost ritual. Initial calibration will establish baseline pain recognition, Vex explained, their crystalline voice carrying an undercurrent of tension. We'll begin with simple thermal variation. Astrid nodded, seeming more interested in the chamber's architecture than the impending discomfort. Beautiful engine. The quantum resonance patterns in the walls, they're adaptive, aren't? Before Vex could respond, Dr. Xylex's voice came through the communication array. Beginning sequence thermal variation from 15 to 45 degrees Celsius. Their crystalline form in the observation booth sparkled with anticipation. The temperature dropped sharply. Most species would show immediate discomfort at such a rapid change. Astrid's vital signs remained steady. She even closed her eyes, appearing almost relaxed. Fascinating, Thalamcrex murmured, their amorphous form rippling as they analyzed the data streams. No stress indicators, no cortisol spike. How are you feeling, Specialist Novak? Reminds me of winter survival training in Antarctica, Astrid replied casually. Though the air was drier there, this has a nice crispness. The temperature suddenly spiked to the other extreme. Sweat beaded on Astrid's skin, but her breathing remained measured, controlled. The research team watched in growing bewilderment as their subject appeared to slip into a meditative. Implementing tactile stimulation, Xylex announced, their form flickering with intensity. The chamber's neural matrices activated, creating sensations of increasing pressure and sharp contact across Astrid's nerve. For the first time, she reacted with a laugh. Tickles a bit, she commented, opening one eye. NXIRA's gaseous form swirled in agitation. The current settings would cause significant distress in most sentient beings. Most sentient beings haven't had to perform emergency surgery on themselves in a war zone, Astrid responded matter-of-factly. Pain is relative and highly manageable with the right mindset. The tests continued. escalating in intensity. Each new level that should have caused distress instead seemed to intrigue their human subject. She asked questions about the technology, offered suggestions for improvement, and occasionally shared stories of past experiences that made the researchers' various forms quiver with discomfort. By the end of the first session, it was the research team, not their subject, that showed signs of strain. Carl's bioluminescence had dimmed to a troubled glow. Thalam's usually fluid form had become rigid with tension. Even Xylix's crystalline structure showed signs of stress fractures. As Astrid disconnected herself from the neural interfaces, she noticed their distress. "You all look like you've seen a ghost," she observed, stretching casually. "Trust me, this was nothing. Though I am curious about what else this chamber can do. Tomorrow's test will be more intensive," Xylix managed, their voice carrying a slight tremor. "We'll explore psychological pain responses." Astrid's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Now that's interesting. Physical pain is straightforward, nerve endings, signal pathways, endorphin responses. But psychological pain? That's where humans get creative." The research team watched her leave the chamber, each processing what they'd witnessed in their own way. Vex's silicon form had developed hairline cracks from maintained tension. NXIERA had to consciously maintain their gaseous cohesion. "This isn't what we expected." Thalam voiced what they were all thinking. "Her responses defy every established pain theory we have." "Perhaps," Xylix responded, their crystalline form clouded with thought. "We need to reconsider what we think we know about human resilience." They studied the data streams, patterns of information that contradicted centuries of xenological research. And perhaps, we need to prepare ourselves for what tomorrow might reveal. In their private quarters that evening, each researcher found themselves haunted by the same question. If this was how humans handled physical pain, what revelations awaited them in the psychological trials? None of them slept well that night, their dreams filled with images of a scarred face and echoes of casual laughter in the face of what should have been agony. The Nexus Chamber hummed with a different energy on the third day. Its neural matrices had been reconfigured for psychological testing, the quantum resonance patterns shifting to create immersive mental scenarios. Dr. Xylix Voss stood at the control panel, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's pulsing lights. "Today's trials will explore emotional and psychological stress responses," they announced, trying to keep their voice steady. "We'll begin with mild separation anxiety and progress through increasingly complex emotional triggers." Astrid, already connected to the neural interfaces, smiled. "Bring it on. Though I should warn you, humans have a peculiar relationship with emotional pain. We tend to seek it out in controlled doses. Ever heard of tragedy in entertainment?" Before Xylix could respond, the chamber activated. The first simulation created a sense of isolation, a void of endless darkness and silence. Most species experienced immediate distress in such conditions. Astrid's neural readings showed increased activity, but not in the expected regions. "Your amygdala is processing this as pleasure?" Thalam Krex's amorphous form rippled with confusion as they studied the data. "How is that possible?" "Reminds me of sensory deprivation training," Astrid explained, her voice calm in the darkness. "Learn to use it for meditation. The void can be quite peaceful once you embrace it." NXIERA's gaseous form condensed with concern. Adjusting parameters. Implementing scenario beta emotional loss simulation. The chamber filled with hyper-realistic projections, scenes of abandonment, betrayal, and grief. Astrid's heart rate increased slightly, but her brainwave patterns remained remarkably stable. She watched the scenarios unfold with an almost clinical and fascinating approach, she commented, analyzing a particularly heart-wrenching scene. "But you're missing a crucial element of human psychological pain. We don't just endure emotional trauma, we transform it. Every loss becomes fuel for growth." Vex Meridian's silicon form vibrated with frustration. "This level of emotional stimulus should be overwhelming. Your species' primitive limbic is anything but Astrid interrupted. "We've evolved to use psychological pain as a catalyst. Watch." She closed her eyes, and the neural readings suddenly shifted dramatically. Instead of suppressing the emotional response, she seemed to be amplifying it. The research team watched in astonishment as Astrid's brain began producing unprecedented levels of neurotransmitters, not just stress hormones, but also compounds associated with learning, and even impossible, Carl whispered, their bioluminescent tentacles flickering erratically. She's using the pain as a stimulant. Maximum intensity, Xylex ordered, their crystalline form now showing visible stress fracture. The chamber projected its most potent psychological scenarios, combinations of fear, loss, and existential dread that had been theoretically modeled to break any conscious. Astrid's response left them speechless. She began to laugh, not hysteria, but genuine, warm amusement. You know what humans call this kind of experience? Character development. We write stories about it, seek it out in controlled doses. Pain shapes us, but it doesn't break us. It never could. The chamber's systems began to overload, unable to process the paradoxical readings from their subject. Xylex was forced to shut down the simulation, their crystalline form now severely clouded with distress. As the neural interface is disengaged, Astrid sat up, stretching. She noticed the state of the research team. Thalam's form had lost all coherence. Anaxiara had retreated to a corner, barely maintaining their gaseous structure, and Vex showed multiple stress fractures across their silicon surface. You all look like you need a drink, she observed, genuinely concerned. On Earth, we often process difficult experiences through social bonding. Would you be interested in learning about this coping mechanism? The researchers exchanged glances, their various forms betraying a mix of terror and fascination. They had come seeking to understand human pain. Instead, they were confronting something far more profound, a species that had evolved to transform suffering into. Perhaps, Xylex managed, their voice barely a whisper, we should take a brief recess to process our finding. Astrid nodded understanding. Take your time. But remember, what you're seeing isn't just pain tolerance. It's the essence of human. We don't just survive pain. We use it, learn from it, grow through it. It's not a bug in our system. As she left the chamber, the research team huddled together, their various forms seeking comfort in proximity. The data streams from the day's trials scrolled endlessly on their monitors, telling a story that defied their understanding of consciousness. We're not ready for this, Nixiara whispered, their gaseous forms still trembling. We're not ready for what they are. Xylex stared at the chamber, their crystalline forms slowly clearing as they reached a decision. No, they agreed. But perhaps that's exactly why we need to understand. The atmosphere in the Helios Institute grew increasingly tense as the fourth day of trials approached. Xylex Voss stood before the ethics committee, their crystalline form showing visible signs of structural fatigue. We never anticipated this level of psychological resilience, Xylex explained, projecting the latest data streams. The human subject isn't just tolerating our most intensive scenarios, she's actively engaging with them, learning from. The committee chamber, filled with representatives from various species, buzzed with uneasy energy. A member of the crystalline collective rose, their multifaceted form refracting. Your latest readings suggest neural patterns that shouldn't be, they stated. The human mind should have significant trauma responses, yet specialist Novak shows signs of adaptation. Before Xylex could respond, alarms blared through the Thalamcrex's panicked voice came over the communication system. Emergency in the Nexus Chamber. The subject, she requested an unauthorized scenario. Xylex and the committee rushed to the research wing, finding chaos. Astrid had somehow gained partial access to the chamber's controls, implementing a simulation of her own design. Through the observation window, they watched in horror as she subjected herself to a recreation of the Orpheus incident, the mining tunnel collapse that had trapped her for 16 days. Shut it down. Nexiara's gaseous form swirled in panic. The neural feedback could be catastrophic, but when they tried to terminate the simulation, Astrid's voice came through, steady and clear. Please, let it run. There's something you need to understand about it. Inside the chamber, Astrid lay perfectly still as the simulated walls pressed in around her. Rather than fighting the experience, she seemed to embrace. The neural readings were unlike anything they'd seen. Patterns of trauma and healing occurring simultaneously, fear transmuting into understanding. This is how we grow, she explained, her voice echoing through the chamber. By facing our darkest moments, by choosing to relive them, to understand them. Pain isn't our enemy, it's our teacher. Vex Meridian. unable to process the readings, suffered a structural collapse. Their silicon form shattered partially, requiring immediate stabilization. Carl Nexus's bioluminescence flickered erratically, their consciousness struggling to maintain coherence. The breaking point came when Astrid began to modify the simulation, intensifying it beyond safety protocols. Xylex, in a desperate move, initiated an emergency shutdown, their crystalline form fracturing from the stress. As the chamber powered down, Astrid emerged, sweating but smiling. She found herself facing a room of thoroughly traumatized alien researchers. Thalum had completely lost their form, pooling on the floor. Xenological had condensed into a tight, defensive ball. "I apologize for the unauthorized access," Astrid said softly. "But you needed to see, pain isn't just something we endure, it's part of how we become who we are." The ethics committee member stepped forward, their crystalline form vibrating with a mix of fear and awe. "The experiment is terminated, effective immediately. This level of psychological manipulation is beyond our current understanding." Astrid nodded, unsurprised. "You wanted to study human pain tolerance, but you weren't ready to understand human pain transformation." As medical teams rushed in to assist the traumatized researchers, Xylex managed to reform enough to ask one final question. "How do you bear it?" Astrid's scarred face softened with compassion. "We bear it because we must. Because every fragment of pain becomes a piece of who we are. Your mistake wasn't in studying our pain tolerance. It was in assuming pain is something to be merely tolerated." The incident would become known as the Nexus Breach in xenological research circles, marking the day when alien scientists first truly glimpsed the depths of human psychological resilience and recoiled in terror from what they found. In the aftermath of the Nexus Breach, the Helios Institute's research wing lay quiet. The once bustling laboratories stood empty, equipment powered down, data streams frozen in mid-analysis. Only the observation room remained active, where Astrid sat across from Dr. Xylex Voss, whose crystalline form had partially healed but still showed deep fracture lines. "I need to understand," Xylex began, their voice carrying harmonics of distress. "The last simulation, you didn't just endure it, you..." Astrid leaned forward, her scarred face reflecting in Xylex's facets. "Pain for humans isn't a linear experience. When that mining tunnel collapsed on Titan, I had a choice. Let the darkness crush me, or use it to forge something new within myself." Xenological, who had finally regained enough stability to maintain their gaseous form, drifted closer. "But the neural patterns we observed, you were simultaneously processing trauma and generating new neural pathways. It defies all known laws of psychological adaptation." "That's because you're thinking of pain as damage," Astrid explained, tracing a finger along her scars. "For us, it's more like metamorphosis. Every struggle, every moment of suffering becomes raw material for transformation." Thalum Krex, still not fully reformed but present as a semi-coherent mass, pulsed with curiosity. "Is this why your species actively seeks out challenges, creates artificial obstacles?" "Exactly," Astrid smiled. "Marathon runners, mountain climbers, competitive athletes, we push our limits not despite the pain, but because of what the pain teaches us. It's our oldest teacher, and we've learned to be very good students." Xylex's form shimmered with sudden insight. "The scarification patterns on your face, they're not just marks of survival, are they? They're a choice," Astrid confirmed. "Every scar tells a story of transformation. We wear our pain, learn from it. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about understanding that being broken isn't the end of the story." The remaining researchers gathered closer, their various forms showing signs of gradual understanding. Even Vex, their silicon structure now reinforced with temporary supports, joined the circle. "We approached this study entirely wrong," Xylex admitted, their crystalline form clearing slightly. "We sought to measure your tolerance for pain, but we should have been studying your relationship with it. Now you're getting..." Astrid nodded. "Pain isn't our enemy. Fear, isolation, loss. These aren't just obstacles to overcome. They're the forge where we remake ourselves. Again, and Carl Nexus, their bioluminescence steadying, asked the question they'd all been avoiding. Does this mean your entire species is slightly insane by your stand? Astrid laughed. Probably, but it's a useful kind of insanity. It's what lets us keep going when logic says we should stop. Keep hoping when reason says to The room fell silent as the aliens processed this revelation. Their various forms reflected the profound shift in understanding, from seeing humans as surprisingly durable primitives to recognizing them as beings who had evolved a completely different relationship with suffering. We owe you an apology, Xylex finally said, their form brightening with sincerity. We thought we were studying a subject. Instead, you've been teaching. No apology needed, Astrid replied, standing. But maybe we can turn this into something productive. Your Nexus Chamber, with some modifications. It could be an incredible tool for human psychological training. Therapy. The researchers exchanged glances, their forms showing a mix of apprehension and intrigue. The idea of willingly using the chamber for personal growth was simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. Would you? Xylex hesitated, their crystal structure vibrating with nervous energy.
Would you be willing to help us understand?
Not as a test subject, but as a teacher. Astrid's scarred face broke into a warm smile. I thought you'd never ask. But first, let's work on your own relationship with this. After all, understanding pain isn't just about enduring it. It's about learning to dance with. The aliens watched as she began sketching modifications to the chamber's design, their various forms reflecting a new emotion. They had come seeking to understand human pain tolerance, only to discover something far more valuable, a new way of seeing suffering. A month after the Nexus breach, the Helios Institute's main auditorium was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Xylex Voss, their crystalline form now stronger and more vibrant than ever, stood at the podium beside Astrid. What we present today isn't just research, Xylex announced, their voice resonating with newfound confidence. It's a fundamental shift in how we understand resilience across species. The modified Nexus Chamber stood on stage, its design now incorporating elements of human psychological understanding. Gone were the strict pain measurement protocols, replaced by adaptive systems designed to facilitate growth and transfer. Our initial hypothesis was flawed, Xylex continued, their forms sparkling with excitement. We sought to measure human pain tolerance, but what we discovered was a species that had evolved beyond mere tolerance. They developed a symbiotic relationship with adversity itself. Astrid stepped forward, her scarification patterns catching the light. To demonstrate, I'd like to invite a volunteer from the audience, not to experience pain, but to understand. The auditorium fell silent. Then, surprisingly, Nex Iara floated forward, their gaseous form steady with determination. Inside the chamber, NX Iara experienced a carefully calibrated simulation, not of pain, but of transfer. Astrid guided them through the process, teaching them to view discomfort not as an enemy, but as information. The audience watched in amazement as Nix Iara's gaseous form began to shift, taking on new patterns and colors. When they emerged, they were fundamentally changed. Not damaged, but evolved. What I experienced, Nix Iara addressed the crowd, their voice trembling with emotion, wasn't suffering in the way we understood it. It was. The presentation concluded with a remarkable announcement. The Helios Institute would be establishing the first interspecies resilience with Astrid as its founding director, and the reformed research team as its core faculty. We've learned that resilience isn't about being unbreakable, Astrid explained to the assembled dignitaries. It's about understanding that being broken isn't the end. It's often just the beginning. The implications rippled through the galactic community. Species that had long viewed humans with suspicion now saw them in a new. The capacity for transformation through adversity wasn't just a human trait. It was a potential that existed in all conscious beings, waiting to be understood. And as the audience filed out, Xylex approached Astrid privately. Their crystalline form now bore its own patterns, not fractures, but deliberate modifications. Inspired by her scarification, "You've changed us all," they said softly. "Not just our understanding of pain, but our understanding of growth itself." Astrid smiled, touching one of her scars thoughtfully. "That's the beautiful irony. You set out to study human pain tolerance and ended up discovering something universal, the capacity for suffering to become strength." for wounds to become